Clues to research. Clues to research. Clues to research. And I gave you a little bit of research to do last week. How many of you did it? You remember I threw you a little ball last week and I said, what relationship was Moses' mother to him besides his mother? His what? Aunt. His aunt. All right. Now, how many of you want to look that up? Did anybody go do it? Huh? No, well, I did answer it, all right, but we didn't. I said, I want you to go find it in the Bible. Remember that? I said, go find it in the Bible. Go find out where it says. All right? Where is it?
Where is it, Fred? I don't know. I just remember him saying
Exodus 6 and verse 20. All right. Exodus 6 and verse 20. Exodus 6 and verse 20. That's where it is. Exodus 6 and verse 20, and somebody find that for me. What translation do you have, Roger?
New American Standard.
Could you come up here? Some of the others might be even better. I don't know. But could you read that for me? Exodus 6 and 20.
Amram married his father's sister, Jochebed, and she bore him Aaron and Moses, and the length of Amram's life was 137 years.
All right. Now, who is that? What should it say there? How would be a modern translation? Amram married his what? His aunt. So Moses' mother was his aunt also, wasn't she? Did you think I was throwing you a curveball or something last Sunday? Anyway, there it is. All right, now let's go back. I didn't quite have enough time to finish the class last week. But let's go back to the Gospel of Mark. The Gospel of Mark looks at Jesus as what? Gospel of Mark looks at Jesus as what? Remember? What was the animal that represented Jesus? On the flag, what? What? Brother Mike? A+ for today, an ox. The servant. All right, he looks upon, and through whose eyes was the Gospel of Mark written? Peter's eyes. All right. It's called, matter of fact, Peter's Gospel so many times. All right, now go back. We're going to go back to, and we're going to look at another little clue to research, okay? Another little clue to research real quick. I went over this last week very quickly, and it was Mark 15 and verse 21. Mark 15 and verse 21. And Jesus was beaten and mocked, and then they were carrying him along. He was suffering and carrying his cross, which weighed, how much did the cross weigh? About how much? About 110 pounds or so. And what it actually was is just the cross beam that was on top. That the cross, these usually stayed out there and they were stuck in the ground, okay? And that had a foot place on it. That doesn't work. It had a place on a foot here like this. Now, you have to see all different kinds of illustration from the movies. But what they would do is they would go out there and they would lay him on the ground, and they had pulleys up here, and they would pull the crossbeam up and stand it up here and then drive the nails in his feet when they got him up there, and there was a seat for him to sit on right here. So he'd last a little longer. Because the cross, what did you die from on the cross? Suffocation. Yeah. You couldn't breathe. You died of asphyxiation. Lack of air, because you couldn't pull yourself up. So they stuck this seat there for them to set their butt on, and they were totally naked. But he was carrying this crossbeam, which was really hard wood, and they would use it over and over and over and over again. You know how many times did the Catholic Church sell splinters from the cross? Okay? Enough to deforest the Black Forest of Germany. That's how many splinters of the cross. But let's look at here now, and let's look at a little clue to research, okay? Now, what kind of a person, what does the average movie, what does the average Bible teacher say that Simon the Cyrene was? What nationality was he? According, huh? African. Okay, because he came from Africa, didn't he? Cyrene in Africa, in the African continent, all right? But, let's read verse 21. They led him out to crucify him, and it said, they pressed into service a passerby coming from the country of Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus, that he might bear his cross. Now, he could have been African. He could have been. But there were 100,000 Judean Jews that lived in this district in Africa. How many of you know that? There were 100,000 of these people that lived there. And they had a synagogue in Jerusalem for these people. Now, he could have been Judean. He could have been a Judean Jew, or he could have been a convert. Either way. All right? But in church history, we find out, now he's the father of what? Of Alexander and Rufus. Now, who were Alexander and Rufus? How many of you know? Nobody knows. They were early church missionaries. In other words, his children became very, very famous missionaries. All right? In the early churches. Romans 16 and 13 and Romans 11 and 20. Let's look at that real quick. Romans 16 and 30 and Acts 11 and 20. Who's got Romans 16 and 13 that wants to come up here and read that? Romans 16 and 13. Who's got that? Are you there, Sharon? Oh, not yet. This young man right there, are you there?
Yes, sir.
You want to run up here and read that for me, please, sir? I can't remember your name.
Verse 13.
Okay, Romans 16:13.
Okay. Okay. Greet Rufus, whom the Lord picked out to be his very own, and also his dear mother, who has been a mother to me.
All right, now who's talking there? The Apostle Paul. Now this is Simon of the Cyrenes. This is his family, okay? This is his family. All right, how about Acts 11 and 20? Who's got Acts 11 and 20? Okay, come up here, Sharon, and share that with us. Okay. Her little old Bible is falling apart,
Everything's falling apart.
like mine.
11:20. But there were some of them men of Cyprus and Cyrene who came to Antioch and began speaking to the Greeks also, preaching the Lord Jesus.
All right, and these are the descendants of this Simon of Cyrene. Now, whether he is Greek, or whether he is African, or whatever he was, we don't know. But we know one thing, that these people became believers. And this man just happened to be on the side of the road there, and whether he was a believer before, but we know that he became a believer now. Okay? He became a believer now. When he carried that cross of Jesus to Calvary, something happened. Whether he was a convert beforehand or after, we do not know. Now let's go on to Mark the 15th chapter. Mark the 15th chapter and finish where we did last week. We're almost finished with the Gospel of Mark, and then we're going to go to the Gospel of Luke. Kata Lukon. What does kata mean in Greek? It's a preposition, but what does it mean? What does kata mean? According to. All right. And we have four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, representing the four flags that flew in the four directions around the tabernacle. Right here. There were four flags that flew around that. Let's go on now. 15 and verse number 41. Last week we looked at Jesus, basically some of his last words when he said, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, or Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. And what were those two languages that spoke? Matthew quoted what language? He quoted what? Matthew quoted? Nope. Hebrew. Now, what language did Peter speak a lot? He spoke Koine Greek, but what was his home language? Aramaic. All right, so this is quoted in Aramaic here, not in Hebrew. The languages are very close, but it's Eloi, Eloi. Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani is Hebrew. Eloi, Eloi is Aramaic. Okay? And so the temple was rent. And verse number 41, and when he was in Galilee, they used to follow him and minister to him there, many of the other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem. In verse number 42, and when evening had already come, because it was a preparation day, that is the day before the Sabbath. How many Sabbaths were there in this last week? How many Sabbaths were in the last week? 3 Sabbaths in that week. You got that one right, brother. You got it. 3 Sabbaths in the last week. The Sabbath is a holy day, and you don't work on that day, okay? There was a regular Sabbath, which was when? When did the regular Sabbath become? From Friday evening at 6 o'clock until Saturday. That was the normal Sabbath, okay? Verse number 43. Now Joseph of Arimathea. Now who was Joseph of Arimathea? This is another clue. All right? What did they do with people's bodies when they took them down off of these crosses of crucifixion? Sometimes they would say, how many long would the bodies normally stay on the crosses? How long would they? That was the main road coming into Jerusalem now. It would go right by this area.
About a week.
Huh? Sometimes they would be on the cross a week or 2 or 3 weeks. There has been historical examples of people dying, taking over 2 weeks to die on those crosses, by the way, if you can imagine it. Why was the purpose of the cross and the crucifixion? Torture. You know, we think about, they think in America, you know, basically, I'm going to tell you something that comes from the book of Genesis. What is the basis for human government? What is the purpose of human government? What's the purpose of human government?
To disrupt people, charge them taxes.
Safety.
Plain old people.
It's like an organization.
That's my first.
Brother Donnie.
Protect them from people and from the government itself.
All right, to protect people from people and to protect people from the government. That's the purpose of government, okay? That's the whole purpose of it. And what is the great deterrent to that? Capital punishment. As simple as that. Okay? Well, this was capital punishment. But when the Romans and when the Syrians exacted capital punishment, they wanted to die real slow. Now in America today, they got down to the point where they're giving them injections and killing people. They inject horses, they inject dogs, they inject cats and everything else, and they kill them with this deadly poison, okay? All right? That's what kills them. But they say it is too inhuman to do that. It's too inhuman to hang them. It's too inhuman to electrocute them. It's too inhuman to shed their blood, as like they do in Utah. They believe in a blood atonement there in Utah. You have to die for your own sins. That's the reason why they still shoot them in Utah. Did you know that? Because they believe in blood atonement. You've got to shed their blood. All right? That's part of it. All right? These are all too inhuman and long and drawn out. But, America today, we are saying that the electrocution, all of these things are too horrifying. How many of you know that when Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla, when they developed electricity, they didn't, what? They didn't know whether to go AC or DC. What's AC? Alternating current. What's DC? Direct charge. And Thomas Edison said that alternating current was too dangerous. So Thomas Edison, on film and in great arenas, first thing he did is they took a great big elephant and they put electrodes on both sides of the head of that elephant and they fired AC current to his head and killed the elephant in front of all these people and said we can't do that. And then he would take dogs and horses and cats and cows and all kinds of animals and he would go from place to place and he would electrocute them and kill them. He couldn't find more elephants. That was really a big deal. If you go look in history, you'll find the elephant that he killed. He tried to tell them that AC current was too dangerous to use in people's homes. Because he and Nikola Tesla were arguing over this. Okay? And so Thomas Edison he finally decided, you know what, since AC is so powerful, let's make the electric chair. You know who invented the electric chair? Thomas Edison. How many of you knew that? Anybody? All right. So, Thomas Edison took the chair and made an electrical chair, and they executed their first customer, and they fried him. They had to electrocute him 2 times, and this barely burned him up because it didn't kill him like it's supposed to. Well, the Romans were not intent on causing quick deaths. They were intent on causing slow deaths. Slow deaths, making a statement. Don't do this. This is what's going to happen to you. You know who usually got crucified out there? The people that were on both sides of Jesus. Who were they? Who were these rats? They were killers and murderers. Basically, the Sicarii. Some of the Sicarii were out there. These people, they preyed on the Romans, but they preyed on their own people too. They were outlaws, okay? And that's the ones, and then we had Barabbas, and they asked for the leader of the outlaws to be turned loose. The master criminal was turned loose in place of Jesus. All right? Now, when they let these people rot on the cross, I know this is pretty rough on Sunday morning, but this is what happened. When they let them rot on the cross and they were already stinking, they would cut them down and they would take their bodies and do what with them? Throw them in the dump. In the dump. They did not give them a burial. When I was in Damascus, Syria in 1975, I was over there in that area, and I mean to tell you what, those people are still chopping people's heads off. I saw people running around with no right hand and no right leg, no right foot. What does the Muslims do when they, If you're religiously not aligned with them, what happens to you if they find it out? They chop your right hand off and chop your left foot off from opposite sides, so you're super crippled. You can't possibly take care of yourself. All right? There's a lot to that. Well, so Jesus should have been thrown in the dump, shouldn't he? All the other people, all the other customers on the cross that day were all thrown into the dump except for Jesus. Now what happens to Jesus? Well, let's see here. All right? Are you learning things of this? Are you learning things? Okay. And Joseph of Arimathea came, and a prominent member of the council. What council? The Sanhedrin court. All right? Now, who is Joseph of Arimathea? He may have been Jesus' uncle. This could have been Joseph's brother. Okay? This could have been Joseph's brother. A lot of those guys had the same first name and different middle names or whatever, okay? Just like Joaquin Marietta. There was 5 of those boys. They all named Joaquin Marietta, but they had different middle names. Okay? Now this could have been Jesus' uncle here. Okay? And he had to be a close relative to even go ask for his body. And if you showed up there looking for a criminal's body, what might happen to you? Well, what might happen to you? You might get to go share that cross again. So this was a very dangerous thing that Joseph of Arimathea did here. But we know already that Pilate did not want to crucify Jesus. He had declared him innocent 5 times. But they demanded his body. Now here comes this old man. Now he's a prominent member of the Sanhedrin Council. I can guarantee he didn't vote against Jesus. He didn't show up to that trial. Nicodemus probably didn't show up to that trial. Did you know that? Okay. Joseph of Arimathea came, and prominent member of the Sanhedrin, a man who himself waiting for the kingdom of God, and gathered up courage and went before Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Otherwise his body would have been thrown in the dump. But what did the Old Testament say? What would happen to the body of Jesus? Brother Mike, you remember? What would happen to the body of Jesus? The Messiah, the Hamashiach. He was going to be buried in a tomb of the rich and the prominent. Joseph of Arimathea is rich, and he's prominent, and he had a special tomb all hewn out for him. Okay? And Pilate wondered if he was dead by this time, because it wasn't very long now. I mean, he just put him on the cross at 9 o'clock, and we only have between 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock to bury Jesus. Okay? We only got 3 hours. At what time did Jesus die on the cross? He died at 3 o'clock. He went on the cross at 9 o'clock, and that's when they were slaughtering the Passover lambs, by the way, all that day. And then he died at 3 o'clock, and so they demanded his body, and so they were going to go take his body down. The rest of them got dumped in the dump. They had to be out of there, because it's a holy day to the Jews, and they couldn't have any dead bodies out there on the cross. Okay? And Pilate was wondering if he was dead by this time, and summoning the centurion, he kept on questioning him as to whether he was already dead. Now, I am changing the wording of this a little bit to correspond to the Greek grammar and stuff. And ascertaining to this from the centurion, he granted the body of Jesus. And Joseph brought a linen sheet and took him down and wrapped him in the linen sheet and laid him in a tomb which had been hewn out in rock, and he rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb. All right, now this was a quick burial that we talked about. Jesus had 2 burials. This is on Wednesday, all right? And they'll come back and bury him thoroughly on Friday. Okay? Friday, of course, that night's going to be another, yes.
Wasn't it against the law to do that the same day? Because it was supposed to be a day before.
Well, we covered a lot of stuff already. They could not have tried Jesus like they did. Pontius Pilate, I read Pontius Pilate's letter to Caesar to you. All right? Now, we know that letter is not inspired of God. And we talked about last week about the book of Jasher, didn't we? We looked in the New Testament at 2 Timothy 3 and 8, and Paul quotes the book of Jasher. All right? And we went to Joshua 10 and 13 and 2 Samuel 1:18. Now, the book of Jasher is not inspired. Okay? I don't want you to understand that this is inspired. It's not. But this is a historical document. And the Jews looked upon this as absolutely accurate. It tells you a lot of things in between in the Bible that's not in the book of Genesis and Exodus. Basically, the book of Jasher covers the time of Genesis and Exodus, from the creation onward, and it tells us a lot of little details that we don't get otherwise. It tells you the names of different people. Like Lamech married Ashuma. How many of you knew that? All right, it tells you that in the book of this. Noah married what? What was Noah's wife's name? Anybody know what Noah's wife's name was? It doesn't say it in the Bible. All right? Her name was Naamah. 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 All right? And then Ham, Shem, and Japheth married daughters of Eliakim. All right? And it also tells you, remember we looked in the Hebrew when we were doing the book of Genesis, how old did we figure that Rebekah was when she married Isaac? 9 or 10 years old. You know what the book of Jasher says she was? She was 10 years old. How do we figure that out from Hebrew? How do we figure it out from Hebrew? Back in those days, rich people had a wet nurse until they were 12 or 13 years old. And they knew that Rebekah was not 12 years old because she still had a wet nurse, and they sent the wet nurse with her when she got married. All right? That sounds really weird today, doesn't it? But that's going back to the time of the Bible, all right? Okay, now we're in the 16th chapter, the last chapter of the Gospel according to Mark. The Gospel according to Mark. And when the Sabbath day was over, or when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and the mother of James and Salome had brought spices. Look at this now. Okay? Here is your super burial of Jesus, all right?
They weren't finished with the burial.
They weren't finished with the burial because they only had 3 hours to do it. Jesus was only quickly buried. He had no spices on him. Now, it says that there were 100 pounds of spices used, weren't they? Now that was 12 ounces to the pounds, and it was only like 75 pounds of spices, but that's a lot of spices. That's the burial of a king. And they would put myrrh, and they would put all types of aromatic spices on him. And what they'd do is they'd wrap him in a sheet. And then they would wrap him up like a mummy, and they'd put spices all between all of this. They would just cover him and just literally like plaster him with spices, okay? That's what they did to mummies in Egypt. But that's what they did. They would take and they would put these wrappings on him, and they would just pour these spices all over until he was like in a cocoon or something. And when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mother James, John brought spices that they might come and anoint him. And then, on another time, very early in the morning of the first day of the week, they came to the tomb when the sun had risen. All right? Very, huh? It's always plural. Sabbaths is always plural. It's Sabbaton. Sabbaton. It always ends like that. And in Greek, now that's, I know you don't understand this, but in Greek, that's plural. Always plural. All right? Sabbaton or Sabbatois. It's always like this at the end. Those are plural endings. What's that plural ending in Hebrew? Yes.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I understand this. So, when he was buried the first time,
Yes.
he arose 3 days after that.
3 days and 3 nights after that time.
Thank you.
Okay. But in the meanwhile, that was on Wednesday. Then Friday they come in before the Sabbath, and they really wrap him up good, and they give him a royal burial. And then we find out also that the Jews went to Pilate, Pontius Pilate, and what did they ask Pilate to do? They wanted Roman guards for the tomb. And what did Pilate tell them?
No.
Jump in a creek. Take your own Jewish Herodian guards and guard it. So in the movies, as you see the Roman guards out there around, that didn't happen. These are Jewish guards. Okay, these are Jewish guards that guarded the tomb of Jesus. Okay. Now, very early in the first day of the week, and what day is that? On Sunday morning. Very early. Real early. All right? Now, when does Sunday actually start? When does Sunday start? What? What time? 6 o'clock Saturday night. Let's go and look at this. Here is the Jewish clock. All right? Here's 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. This is the first hour. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then here's 12. Okay, that's when it ends. It's all upside down from what ours is. So very early in the morning. It could have been any time from 6 p.m. on Saturday onward. But I would think, this is my opinion, that's all. Just my opinion. I think that it probably was sometime before daylight, between 12 o'clock and 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. It's before daylight, okay? Sometime before daylight on that day. Very early on the first day of the week, which is Sunday, and this was probably Sunday morning, maybe 12 o'clock to 5 o'clock, somewhere around there, okay? When the sun had risen, whatever time that is, they were saying one to another, "Who will roll away the stone for us for the entrance of the tomb?" And looking up, they saw a stone had been rolled away, although it was extremely large. Very large stone. If you go to Gordon's tomb over there, how many of you have been in Israel? Jerusalem? Nobody? Has anybody been here? Over there at all? Nobody? Well, over there at Gordon's tomb, which may or may not be the tomb that Jesus was in, okay? We don't know. But there is a hole in the wall, like this, And down below the hole in the wall is a track. And there was a large round stone that was rolled up here, and actually it puts right there, and they roll it in front, and they would seal it with wax all the way around, and they would take a signet ring and put the signet ring in there, and the high priest's signet ring was all around this. Because these Jewish guards that were there were supposed to be guarding this. All right? And they didn't want that seal broken. Because they thought, what did the Jews think about Jesus?
That he'd be more powerful if he got out. He'd be followed more.
What did they think?
That he had more
What did Jesus predict? Even to his disciples, the disciples didn't believe it, but the Jews did. Bonnie? That he was going to rise. That he was going to, he taught that he was going to rise on the third day. And here it is, the third day now. All right? This is the third day. So let's go on and look on a little further. They saw the stone had been rolled away. Now, whether it was on top, it could have been a cave down in the ground like this, but I don't think so. Lazarus' tomb has a tomb, something like this. It's down in the ground would have a stone over the front of it also. I've been to Lazarus' tomb. They know that's Lazarus' tomb, by the way. They don't know whether this is Jesus' tomb, but they know where Lazarus is buried in Bethany. All right, they know that one. All right, and I've been down in Lazarus' tomb. Well, they had a large stone over it anyway, regardless. Verse 5, and entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting at the right, wearing a white robe. Now, if you go to Gordon's tomb, everything's just about right there, whether this is the right place or not. You walk into Gordon's tomb, you walk past this door here, where there was a trough, where there was a big round stone, flat stone against it, and over here to the right is a niche where they buried people. And up here above the niche is a place where they sat. People would sit there and mourn. This is what you call a wake or whatever. What they did was kept the rats and stuff away from the bodies. That's what they were there for. People used to have wakes in early America, and people stayed up awake all night long to keep the rats from eating the bodies of the dead people. And that's what they would do here until they got ready to close the tomb. Okay? That sounds real gruesome, but that's what's happening. And he said to them, literally it says in Greek that he kept on saying to them, do not be amazed. Do not be amazed. You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene, who has been crucified. He has risen. He is not here. Behold, here is the place where they laid him. All right? Now, what did they see over there, by the way? What did they see over there where Jesus had been laid? The other Gospels tell you this. What did they? What was that, Brother Bill?
Linen cloth was folded up and placed in.
Okay, the linen cloths that he was wrapped in, they weren't all glued and stuck together like a cocoon, but they were all disassembled and they were wrapped and folded right there at the head of the bed where he was laid, this niche. It doesn't tell you that in every place, Brother Mike. Of the Shroud of Turin, you've heard about all that business. All right.
Significance that it was wrapped up and placed very neatly there. Is there a significance to that?
It's it is as if everything just dissolved and went away. All of the spices and everything, just like they were just, everything was just like it never happened. Now, the Gnostics, I didn't tell you this last week, but the Gnostics say that Simon the Cyrene was crucified in the place of Jesus. Did you know that? This is what the Gnostics said. Paul fought the Gnostics, John fought the Gnostics. All of John's writings castigate heavily the Gnostics. They say that Jesus was never crucified. If you ask a Muslim today and ask about the crucifixion of Jesus, what will they say? Huh? That he was not crucified. Surely they didn't do that. No way. He just died of old age or whatever, you know. The crucifixion is very...
That is the real shroud of Turin?
Do I what?
Do you think that's the real linen cloth of Jesus?
Do you think the thing that Catholics have is really something that was on Jesus?
There is so much baloney in that stuff, but we do not know.
Could be,
Okay.
couldn't be. It doesn't matter, does it?
It doesn't matter anyway. Okay, it doesn't matter anyway. If, let's go back to the book of Jude real quick. What happened to Moses' body when he died? What happened to Moses' body?
Someone buried, he got buried.
Who buried Moses? Who buried Moses? Jehovah buried Moses. He buried in the mountain where he looked. He died up on the mountain where he looked in and saw the promised land. I've been there, by the way. That's pretty cool. All right? Anyway, God buried him in that mountain. But what happened after he was buried? There was a Catholic there. Who was that Catholic that was looking for the body of Jesus, or body of Moses? The devil. The devil wanted to try to get the body of Moses. And he had a fight with who? Michael the archangel over the body of Moses. Why? If Israel could have had the body of Moses, they would have been worshiping his bones to this day. Now, I have been at the cave of Machpelah. And that's a holy, holy place as far as I'm concerned. In that cave is Sarah and Abraham and Isaac and Rebekah and Jacob. All of these, Jacob and Leah, they're all buried in that tomb. All in that tomb. They go there and they worship at that tomb. Did you know that? Because their bones are there. Moses is considered by the Jewish people to be a god, so to speak. If you use Moses' name in vain, you know what's going to happen to you? They will kill you. Just like you use the Lord's name in vain. By the way, in Hebrew, that's how you say Moses. Moshe. 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 All right?
Jim, is Rebecca in that?
Rebecca's there also.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Who was buried on
No, Rebecca, talking about Leah's there, but not Rebecca. Rebecca has her own tomb. And the Jews go and worship at that tomb also. I've been to Rebecca's tomb, yes.
Where in the Bible again does it talk about the devil?
The book of Jude. The book of Jude.
Book of Jude.
Book of Jude, yeah. All right, now let's go on. Jesus the Nazarene was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. Behold, here is the place where they laid him. And then it says in verse number 7, and you're going to be surprised here in just a little bit, real quick. But go and tell his disciples and Peter, he is going before you to Galilee. What does Galilee mean? Circle. There you will see him, just as he said to you. I'll meet you in Galilee. All right? And verse number 8, and they went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had gripped them, and they said nothing to one another, for they were absolutely struck out of their senses. That's the end of the Gospel of Mark. Did you know that? That's all there is. Well, does it go on? It goes on, but look over in the footnote and what it says. Over there from verse 9 on, what does it say? Huh? Not until about 800 A.D. that the rest of this get added someplace. That's a little bit late, isn't it? A little bit late. All right? Now let's go ahead and read it, okay? Even though we know that this is just, what we're reading there is just like this book. It's just like books that we don't know whether are inspired or not, history things. And let's see, and there's problems. Now, if you're a Greek scholar, you know one thing, that the language in the Gospel of Mark changes from now on. This is basically the end. of the Gospel of Mark. But some preacher or somebody added the rest of it. And you see it's in brackets. All right, now let's go and look. And there's lots of problems with these verses, by the way. Lots of problems, lots of theological problems with these verses. Now, after he'd risen on the first day of the week, he appeared to Mary Magdalene, from whom he had cast out 7 demons. Now, there's basically nothing wrong with that. He did cast out demons, didn't he? Out of her. And we know that Mary Magdalene actually existed. All right? And not only did Mary Magdalene existed, what does the Da Vinci Code say about her? That was his wife, which was baloney. Okay, that's baloney too. And she went and reported to those who had been with him while they were mourning and weeping. Now, what this is doing from here on, the rest of the Gospel of Mark, is it took all the other Gospels and took elements out of them and started sticking them together, plus a little bit out of their own heads. Okay? And when they heard that he was alive and had been seen by her, they refused to believe it. Now, we know that some of them refused to believe it, didn't they? We know that Peter and John had a foot race there to the tomb, didn't they? It doesn't tell you that in this gospel, but we know that happened. But we had one guy that did not believe at all, and what was his name? Thomas. All right? And what was his nickname? Didymus, which means what? Twin. All right? And he did have a nickname, a modern nickname, Brother Brett, which means Doubting Thomas, yes. And after that, he appeared to them, 2 of them, while they were walking along their way to the country. Now, we find that in the, where? Luke, and also in the book of Acts. We see that too, later on. And they went away and reported to the others, and they did not believe them either. Verse number 14. And after he appeared to the 11 themselves as they were reclining at table, laying up to table is what it literally says, and he reproached them for their unbelief and hardness of the heart, because they had not believed those who had seen him after he had risen. All right? And he said to them, go into the world and preach the gospel to all creation. Now, people have taken this verse right here, and they preach the gospel to rabbits and dogs and cats and birds. Did you know that? They have done that, and that they have used it because it's said to all the creatures. But that's really not really there anyway, is it? Okay? Verse number 16. And he who has believed and has been baptized shall be saved. All right, here's where your Brother Bill, this is where all your family takes all of their doctrine. Okay? Who believed this? Who quotes this over and over and over again? What group of churches quote this verse right here? Huh? Church of Christ. Church of Christ and your oneness. Pentecostals. They all believe in baptismal regeneration, don't they? All right. Acts 2:38 and Mark 16 and 16. All right. He who has believed and has been baptized shall be saved. Now, the Bible doesn't say any place in the world that you need to be baptized before you're saved, does it? But it puts baptism before salvation here, doesn't it? That's what you're baptized for, the remission of sins according to the Catholic Church. And you're baptized for the remission of sins according to the Church of Christ. And you're baptized for the remission of sins according to the oneness brethren. That's a real hyper weird Pentecostal group, and they're also the apostolics believe the same thing, but they take it from out of context. Now we could go to Acts 2:38. You're baptized what? Not for the remission of sins, but what? Because of the remission of sins. Acts, there's a little word there, ace. And ace means extension or limitation of thought or verbal action, if you want to get into that. And that's too much for some of you right now. I know that, but we could do that later. You're baptized because you have received the forgiveness of sins, is what it literally says. And he who has believed and has been baptized shall be saved, but he who has disbelieved shall be condemned. And all these signs will come to those who believe in my name, and will cast out demons, and will speak in new languages. Now, this chapter right here was invented for the Church of Christ and for the Pentecostal brethren, all right? This is where it comes from. No other place in the New Testament are you going to find really this right here. And here we have the serpent handlers. How many of you ever watched them on television or something, the serpent handler? These are the people that pick up deadly serpents and they will kiss them and they will go into all the ecstatic trances and everything else, and they will defy these animals to bite them, and when they do bite them, they won't seek medical attention and they croak. As simple as that. All right?
They chewing on peyotes.
Well,
What they do.
peyote is different. Peyote is a hallucinatory drug which you make into a tea and you drink it. And the Comanches and the Apaches use that. All right? The Comanches and the Apaches. And they will pick up serpents and they will drink any deadly poison. And they drank poison. Cyanide and strychnine and all this kind of stuff. They do all of this stuff. And they'll quote this all the time. And it shall not hurt them, and they will lay hands on the sick and they will recover. Pretty wild ending to this chapter. And so when the Lord Jesus had spoken to them, he received up in heaven and sat down at the right hand of God. And they went out and preached everywhere while the Lord worked with them, confirmed them by signs that follow. Now, read down, it's got comments or whatever after this. You find out that from verse 9 on was not in the original language. A lot of things were changed, and how many of you, does all of your Bibles say that?
No.
Usually after verse 8.
Yeah, from verse 9 on. Okay, that's not in the original language. But that's where we, what?
I don't see where it says this.
What do you mean it doesn't say that?
Just in print.
What translation do you have, Brett?
I have the red letter edition, so. You know, understand.
Well, the red letter edition is any edition that has Jesus' words in red. Okay. Mine says that from verses 9 onward we're not in the old manuscripts. That's much later added. All right. How many of you knew that? Any of you knew that the last part of the Gospel of Mark was not really there? I'm not saying that the Word of God is not inspired. I believe that the Word of God is absolutely inspired in the original languages. Tense, mode, and voice. Everything. Absolutely without fail and in total perfection. I believe that. And I've taught that ever since I learned Greek and Hebrew. Because if you look at it, and if you listen to my classes when I teach any of the Gospels or anything, we'll go there and we'll get the Greek and the Hebrew will get your theology straightened out. I can guarantee you, if you'll let it. You can go on and believe whatever you want to. Okay? But the Greek and Hebrew will set you straight. Is that right, young lady? You've seen enough of that? All right.
Well,
Chris?
doesn't this completely go against what is said in 1 Corinthians?
Yes. Yes, it does. It does. We are finishing 1 Corinthians, by the way, on Wednesday night. This afternoon I'll be teaching the prophecy of Jacob from the Hebrew language. It's really good. Next week we'll start in the Gospel of Luke. Bill, we've made it through one more book. Through one more book. All right. And who's coming up here?
I got one announcement.
All right, you got an announcement. Dave, you're coming up here. All right. Thank you today for your attention. And please pray for me this week. I've had a rough week.
Okay, we got the Valley Baptist night with the Blaze. Actually, my cousin's the one that bought the team. He's doing really well. He's in oil. Him and his partner bought it, and they're trying to get a new